In my community, I'm known as the Barkindji warrior and a life weaver and dream walker. And what that means is that I've always been someone that's followed my heart and my dreams. And I've also been someone who's always woven my roles together. So in our culture, we do a lot of basket weaving, weaving art. And for me, that's an analogy that's worked far better than balancing or juggling, because when I think of the roles that I hold as a mother, as a First Nations woman, as a businesswoman, as an athlete, it can be quite easy to get lost in those roles, whereas if you learn to weave them together, it's about them being supportive of each other. And I've got my 1-year-old here, so that's the part of the weaving of it all together. And Barkindji Warriors, the name my community gave me for the work that I do, and just always following my heart and choosing to see the vision rather than what's in front of me. I've always been a fighter. I grew up in regional New South Wales, in a world that was not set up to see me thrive. Being both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal, but being with white skin, I was told that I was either too much or not enough. And I was actually 15 at school when a teacher said to me I was more likely to end up dead or pregnant than I was to finish school. So that was when I determined that I was going to write my own narrative. And growing up fighting, it was my way of protecting myself. But by the time I was 19, I was getting into street fights, I was getting into fights in nightclubs. I took it upon myself to protect other people, but I started to enjoy the violence, and it started to become very destructive rather than a protective behaviour. But that was a trauma response. It was a conditioning that had happened because of what I'd been through. So that was my entry point into martial arts, and it just evolved over there, kind of just one step after the other. So pre-COVID, I was in the top 5 in Australia. I was competing internationally, I was ranked internationally, and I was on track to get my black belt, and I was on track to have my best year yet in business. And then COVID happened, and I made the decision to leave Melbourne because everything was shut down. We moved back to regional Victoria, and it was then that I was like, well, maybe my career's done, because looking realistically, being based regionally, the financial impacts, and we decided to have another baby. And my plan was to have a natural birth, be back on the mats within 6 weeks. Well, that got shattered. My son was 15 days overdue. I was 140 kilos plus, and I also fractured my tailbone. I didn't even know that was a thing. And for me, that first attempt, 4 months postpartum, to try and get back on the mats it was heartbreaking. It was soul destroying, because it had shattered everything I knew about myself and who I thought I was. So I thought Jiu-Jitsu would just become a recreational thing. And then in 2022, my partner and my daughter both graded together. So my oldest daughter got her blue belt, which is like her first kind of entry into the adult levels. And my partner got his black belt, and I was sitting there and I was really, really frustrated, because I was like, that was meant to be me. And then my daughter decided to compete at the World Championships, and her dad went with her as her coach. And I remember sitting in the hotel room, and I'm watching her live. I've got 3 younger ones, and I've had to go out and do a speaking tour effectively to fund her trip, because we're a self-funded sport. And I remember just this anxiety and this stress rising up, and I sat with it, and I realised I was jealous and resentful. And rather than running from that, I took that as a sign that it was showing me that I wanted something. And I really sat with it for a long time and thought, is this just ego? Is it just fear of missing out? But I think for me, really sitting with it allowed me to realise that me returning to competition was connected to a bigger piece, a bigger puzzle. Being almost 40, being a mum of 6 children, of such a big age gap, but also just so many women my age are like, oh no, I'm done now, or it's like it's time to focus on other things. And I feel like there's so much value and impact, because female athletes as a vehicle for social change is something we haven't even begun to explore for their impact. I run a program called Kililana Titters, which is growing sisters in Barkindji, which is my community. And we now have over 10 to 15 young Aboriginal women and mums training Jiu-Jitsu, like in a regional town. And some of them are competing. My daughter got double bronze at the Worlds last year. And to see that impact, that ripple effect of just you being visible and present, has given me the courage to go, let's find out. Let's see how far I can go in this next chapter.